Well, we can chat about the Premiership action shortly, but the Champions and Challenge Cups have been suspended after the French government weren't happy with the top 14 clubs taking part. Is this the right outcome, do you think, boys?
Can you believe it, that the French, of all people, have come to the fore and said, no, we not do. What do you mean? You've had fans in the stadiums, you've been almost sold out in some of the games that I've seen, and then all of a sudden, they've put their foot down. It shows, Goody, do you not think? It shows the power that the French Rugby Federation and the leagues have. Do you not think? I know there's a lot of other stuff to maybe throw into the mixer in terms of how everything's structured and finances, but they are their own kind of entity, if you like. But they've got a lot of power, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. And I suppose, the English clubs have as well in that respect, because they are an individual league. So it's very much the clubs as opposed to the unions that are in charge. Now, for me, it's taken too long to come to this decision. I was chatting to a director of rugby in the Premiership yesterday, and he's like, how do you prepare a squad on a Sunday, on a Monday, to understand what's going to go ahead the following weekend, whether it be a Premiership game, a Champions Cup game, when you just don't know anything? So, yeah, I mean, am I surprised it's happened? Do I think it's the right outcome? I 100% believe it is the right outcome under the current circumstances of the situation of the pandemic across the whole of Europe. You look at the figures that are coming out, it's horrific what you're seeing. So in terms of, as Jim said, I commentated on a game at the back end of last season, Toulon against Leicester Tigers in the Challenge Cup quarter-final, I think it was, or semi-final. And it was down at Toulon, and there was 10,000 people in the stadium when there was only supposed to be 1,000. So
it looks like 10,000. Let's just make us, we're that big now that we could get sued. Or you
well, yeah. But so for them to come out and say we're not happy with cross-border matches and stuff, it's interesting, because what they've said is up until the end of January. Now the French government and the FFR, the French Rugby Federation, have obviously been in cahoots and said, fuck the club game, we still need the Six Nations to go ahead. And so they're going to obviously review it and look to make it slightly different around the Six Nations, because the Six Nations is effectively in 3 weeks' time, isn't it, the first game? And that's obviously cross-border competition for France. And is it the right decision? Yes, I think it is. I wrote a column for Rugby Pass on it, just saying that actually it makes sense. Just focus purely on your domestic league at the minute, within the restrictions that we're all living under, because we are on a lockdown. If you think of where the game was back in March, April, in terms of the pandemic situation, we're supposedly, figures-wise and cases and deaths and everything, we're in a way worse position than we were back then. And rugby was canned at the time, wasn't it? It was postponed completely. So it makes a huge amount of sense to put that on hold. There's then loads of questions around what should the English clubs do over the next few weeks? Should the season carry on the same? There's loads of moving parts in this jigsaw around, trying to move Premiership games, but then to free up some weekends further down the track for the Champions Cup games and the Challenge Cup games to then be played. But the Pro 14, do they play games this weekend or next weekend? Alongside whether the Premiership clubs do. And you've got to get buy-in from absolutely everyone. If one person at a Premiership club says, we don't think it's the right decision to play Premiership games this weekend where the European games have been cancelled, you can't play them because you can't take the risk. So, it's all very well singing from the rooftop saying we should just move everything. But I think the right decision has come. Obviously, there's financial ramifications around it. You look further down the line, where are they going to squeeze these games in if they aren't cancelling it, if they just postpone it? Well, you can't see a free weekend, and that might mean a midweek game here or there. But that's the decision for the clubs to take further down the line to see where the players are at, because at the minute, obviously, the pandemic is at its most serious point. And you have to respect that and understand that it's a good decision, I think, to postpone these games.
Goody, you touched on it. The Pro 14 have brought forward Glasgow, Edinburgh, Munster, Leinster. The top 14 have brought forward some games as well and arranged them for this weekend. Do you think the Premiership could have done that? Because there have been calls for that to happen, haven't they?
I think Pat Lam said it, Rob Baxter said it, Lee Blackett said it. Three of the top directors of rugby, head coaches, call them what you will, in the Premiership at the minute in terms of the league table, have said they want to carry on, and rearranging it is fine. But then if you've got one club that doesn't want to do it because they've been, they've got worries, or they've got coronavirus in the camp at the minute potentially, or who knows, it's got to be a one in all in decision. And if Premiership Rugby couldn't get everyone to agree it in a day because of the delay from the French side, then you can't just lob some games in. People are talking about, what about all the cancelled games? Let's put them back in. Well, those points have already been distributed. The club's already signed up for what the parameters were around those points, and we talked about it last week, whether we think it's right or not. It doesn't matter. The clubs have signed up for it and agreed to that on the basis of that is what's going to happen this year, and there's no change around it. So do I think they could have played? Yes, I do. But on the other side, I think if one club, one doctor, one physio or anyone thought there was a risk of it, bearing in mind the current circumstances, and if you can't get full committal from every club, you just can't do it. So it's a difficult decision. We may look further down the track and say, actually, it was a good idea to have, a 2-week block where the players got some rest. And it might be a good decision, but I think for the here and now, unless everyone's on board with it, it's no good just Pat Lam and Lee Blackett and Rob Baxter shouting about it from the rooftops that they could and should have done it. It has to be a buy-in from everyone, and I believe that wasn't the case.